Good evening. This is the July 22nd, 2026 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Daniela Rible, for this meeting. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then please read your announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure quorum. Member Bars? Bars absent. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, present.
Baumgarten present. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels present.
Daniels present. Member Ford? Ford absent. Member Kim? Kim absent. Member Laboro? Laboro absent. Member Levine?
No, I'm here.
Member Levine present. Member Margarita?
Margarita, present.
Margarita present. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Member Kim, I'd like to acknowledge Member Kim is present. Chair, we have quorum also. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you are allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move on to item 2, Chair's Report. I'd like to share some public engagement activities that are underway for some Transportation Authority-led efforts. The Western Addition Geary Boulevard Community Study will develop transportation and land use concept designs that rethink the urban renewal era Geary Expressway and advance a high-quality, multimodal, mixed-use, transit-oriented area to connect the Japantown and Fillmore Western Addition neighborhoods and promote community livability. The study has a survey available on the Transportation Authority's website seeking feedback about study goals, neighborhood priorities, areas that seem unsafe or challenging, and desired uses, services, and amenities. The survey is available in multiple languages: English, Spanish, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and Russian. There are also several community council events scheduled in July and August, such as a Japantown tour hosted by the Japantown Task Force this Friday, July 24th, with additional outreach opportunities planned. Visit sfcta.org/Western Addition Geary for more information about the study, to participate in the survey, and to view the community outreach event calendar. The Bayview Caltrain Station Location Study will recommend the selection of a single new Caltrain station location in the Bayview and help prepare the station for environmental approval. The prior Paul Avenue Caltrain station was closed in 2005, and development of a replacement station to restore access to Caltrain and the regional transit network to the Bayview community was part of the Prop K and now Prop L expenditure plans. The Transportation Authority project team is conducting community outreach this summer to share information about the study and gather public feedback. Outreach is also taking place during this evening's meeting through the Bayview Hunters Point Citizen Advisory Committee, which is why staff is unable to present to the CAC tonight. Additional public outreach events are anticipated the week of August 17th. For more information about the study and public engagement opportunities, visit sfcta.org/Bayview Caltrain, Bayview-Caltrain. Staff anticipates returning to the CAC for action on the study's final report at our September 23rd meeting. CAC members who would like a briefing on the study before it returns in September should contact Amy Sayung, Clerk of the Transportation Authority. In April 2026, the Transportation Authority announced a call for projects for up to $48.7 million in One Bay Area Grant, or OBAG, County program for San Francisco over the next 4 years. The Transportation Authority received 14 project applications requesting $89.1 million in OBAG Cycle County program. Applications are now available for public review on the Transportation Authority's website. Staff recommendations for which applications to advance to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for final selection will be presented to the CAC this fall, anticipated September 9th. Applications can be reviewed at sfcta.org/funding on the OBAG webpage. Switching gears, I'd like to welcome, is Diana Labaro, Member Labaro here yet? No, not yet. Okay. Well, we're hoping for our new District 11 representative to join us tonight. And then tonight is also the last meeting for Sarah Bars, whose term expires this month. On behalf of the CAC, I want to thank Sarah for her dedicated service and for the thoughtful insights she has shared throughout her tenure. We all serve as volunteers and balance many personal and professional commitments, so we especially appreciate the time and energy she has devoted to this committee. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your service and for the many contributions you've made to the CAC. We wish you all the best. Yeah. As a reminder for CAC members and folks listening, this is our last meeting before August recess. We will convene next on September 9th to weigh in on items advancing to the board in September. Moving on to meeting management, CAC members, if you'd like to speak, please indicate so by standing your name card on end so that it's visible to me. When I call on you to speak, we have these nice new microphones, so press the raised black button now on the microphone base. The base light will turn green, indicating that the microphone is live. Please remember to turn it back off when you're done speaking. CAC members and public commenters in the room, as well as staff, please be sure to speak closely and directly into the microphone so folks attending virtually can hear you. Please try to limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. And please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Vice Chair Daniels.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to speak to Sarah Bars. Member Bars, I have enjoyed your presence on this body. You have been such a support. Oftentimes when difficult things come across as they do with what we're dealing with, I've been like, who's going to say something? And you've always been that voice. You've always been that beacon of light. You have been our North Star to keep us on track, and you will be missed. But good luck in your endeavors, and I look forward to seeing you out there in the movement. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Member Bars.
Thank you, Vice Chair Daniels. And I would just really want to say it has been truly such a pleasure to serve on this committee the past 4 years. I sent a note to Chair Siegel, but I am always so impressed with everybody here, very much including you, Vice Chair Daniels. And I will be sad to step away from this body, but I'm choosing not to seek reappointment. So I know the next person who serves District 7 will do a very good job of that. I'm very confident. But yes, I'm very sad to step down from this body. I think this is this is a great body. And I really think that your leadership, both of you, Chair and Vice Chair, you do a really wonderful job rounding out the conversation. And so thank you. Thank you very much. And big thank you to staff. So thank you, Director Lombardo, and thank you, Clerk. And thank you.
Thank you, Member Bars. We'll miss your voice on this body and working with you. All right. Member Margarita, yes.
This is shocking. You're going to definitely be missed. You're definitely a beautiful voice on this board, and your intentions were always about community and making sure that their voices were heard. So you're absolutely going to be missed. And likewise, I echo everyone else's sentiment, and hopefully you won't be a stranger. But thank you for your service, and I wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Not seeing anyone. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
There's no remote public comment. Oh, sorry. I see Roland has his hand up. Sorry about that, Roland. Okay, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you, and no worries. You know, my heart just missed a beat, but that's okay. I want to echo everybody's comments about Member Daniels. I believe Sarah. She's going to be sorely missed. I actually got to meet her in person last December. Believe it or not, in all places, yes, she was in San Jose, representing the CAC. And she did ask some actually pretty informed questions about the PAX and the DTX, which I thought that was really, I felt really good about that. So the other comment I have is that I did listen carefully, and then again, not having a transcript is a real problem if I want to go back. But I did go to the TA's website on the base show study, and I clicked on public engagement. There's absolutely nothing whatsoever about any kind of meeting tonight. So through the chair, if somebody could explain if I'm looking in the right place or not, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, if there's no additional public comment is closed. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 and 4 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the consent agenda?
There's no remote public comment on the consent agenda.
All right, may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, item 3 on the consent agenda? Moved by Member Margarita, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve the minutes, item 3 on the consent agenda, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten.
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford. Ford, absent. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Labaro, absent. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, I. Member Margarita.
Margarita, I.
Margarita, I. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, I. Member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, I. There are 9 ayes. The consent agenda is approved.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 5, Community Advisory Committee Ethics Training for Public Meetings. And we have Maria Lombardo, Chief Deputy, will provide a brief introduction to this item, and then Amber Maltby, Legal Counsel, will present.
Great, thank you, Chair Siegel. I think many of you met on the way in. Our partner with Nossaman and a council many of you have seen before, Amber Maltby, who conducts our annual ethics training for the Community Advisory Committee. So for some of you, this will be familiar, and others, this will be relatively new. I just wanted to point out one of the new things is with some of the changes to Brown Act and related legislation at the state level, CAC members are now going to be required to basically every 2 years have 2 hours of ethics training and 2 hours of fiscal financial training. Regardless of that, we still felt it was very worthwhile to have an in-person training with Amber to let you ask questions and get a basic grounding in it, which I think will make the online trainings better. But with that, Amber, I will let you introduce yourself. And then if you want to take questions as you go or at the end, if you could let the chair know your preference.
First off, Amy, a logistical issue. I lost the share screen thing again.
And then Amber, you gotta be a buddy with the microphone. There you
Okay, is that better? Got it. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. And as to taking questions, either I think during is fine, if that is the chair's preference as well.
Sure. So members, if you have a question, feel free to put your card up during the presentation and I'll call on you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you everybody for being here this evening for your ethics training. My name is Amber Maltby. I'm a partner with Nossaman, and I've been doing this training for a number of years now, so it's always a pleasure to come back. So tonight we will be talking about big picture. What are the general rules that the ethics laws impose on you all as community advisory committee members? But the goal for tonight is not for you all to walk away as ethics law experts or to walk out of here knowing everything. Our goal for tonight is for everybody to leave this evening confident that you can identify when there might be an issue that should be flagged and brought to Maria or to Amy, because there may or may not be an ethical question involved. We'll also hope to equip you with the ability to identify the difference between an actual legal conflict of interest or when there might be an appearance of a conflict of interest and how to navigate those scenarios. And then finally, what is the actual process if you have identified that there's a conflict requiring you to recuse yourself from participating in a matter? So why are you here? Maria went over that a little bit. So as community advisory committee members, you are not public officials as identified in one body of law that governs this area, the Political Reform Act. But under other provisions of the Government Ethics Code, you are what are deemed local agency legislative officials because you're a committee to another governing body. And so for those reasons, we are providing both best practices that are set forth in the Political Reform Act, and then also there are obligatory ethics trainings that you all will have to comply with, and tonight's training goes over some of that. And then finally, because you are on a public body, and you do make decisions on behalf of your communities, you are stewards of the public trust. So you are sitting here in with a heightened responsibility. So as I noted a moment ago, there are two laws that tonight we'll be referring to. One is the Political Reform Act. The Political Reform Act governs all public officials in California, whether you're a member of the legislature or you're a public employee for a public agency. If you're a public official, then your conduct is governed by the Political Reform Act. And then SB 827 was a bill that went into effect this year, and it requires local agency officials to receive ethics training, and the members of this body are required to receive that training as well. It's a mandate that has to be met every 2 years. So I mentioned that the CAC is not, you all are not public officials under the Political Reform Act. However, I wanted to go over briefly with you all the special treatment that an advisory body receives under the law. So the members of an advisory body can become public officials over time if the action items that you are taking result in binding decisions for the governing board. So if this body were authorized to actually enter the TA into a contract and that vote was binding, or if the advisory committee were able to actually approve a grant, then you all would become public officials. Similarly, if the votes that you all are taking, your recommendations are being rubber stamped by the TA board, then you all would potentially become public officials. Right now, because you are advisory only, you're not public officials, but just something to be aware of. You are right on that precipice, and so you are looked to again conduct yourselves along the same lines. So a quick way to think about ethical principles, there are two categories. One is, what does the law tell you to do? And then and think of that as the floor. And then the other category is, what is the right thing to do? So what is the right thing to do in any given situation, even if the law isn't stepping in and saying that you are required to recuse yourself or refrain from doing something in a particular situation. So tonight we're talking about the law, but we'll also be thinking through the lens of the position that you hold and what are the optics of voting on certain matters depending on your private and personal interests that may come into play. So as a big picture of what your responsibility is as advisory committee members, the decisions that you're making, remember, they are always to be in the public interest and to put forward the best interests of the communities that you're here to represent. And given the glowing words that I just heard about your outgoing member, I can tell that is a principle that is truly embodied by everybody on this committee. So that was really great to see and really touching. You want to always be mindful that when you're making recommendations, particularly about things like grants, how federal funding should be spent, you're acting in your capacity as a steward of public taxpayer dollars. So that is a really mighty responsibility. And you also want to think about making sure that you're operating from a level playing field so that, again, if you have a private personal interest or a private financial interest, that isn't clouding your judgment when you're making decisions. You're putting that on the back burner and thinking again about the agency and about the district and your constituents. So let's talk about one of the main things that we'll be talking about tonight is a conflict of interest. When should you recuse yourself from participating in a vote that's on your agenda? So under the Political Reform Act, a conflict of interest occurs when you have when a governmental decision will have a material financial effect on one of your financial interests. Now, as you all could imagine, every single one of those words has their own special meaning. But the idea of it is actually pretty simple. If you're voting on something, will it have an impact on something that you have a personal financial interest in, you or your spouse? And if it will, then you should recuse yourself in that case, unless an exception applies. So, what are your financial interests? This is actually set forth in the Political Reform Act as well. There are 5 financial interests that you should be watching out for. The first one, and these are not in any particular order, but one of 5 are business interests. And this can be anything from if you have an officer or director position in a for-profit entity. So, for example, if you are a manager with a limited liability corporation, even if you're not making income, that would still be a business interest. Also, if you have investment, so if you hold stock in a corporation, that would be a business interest. So you'd be looking at interests like that as a business interest. Another financial interest, and this one comes up frequently, I think here, is real property. So if you own property, either your personal residence, if you have property that you have tenants renting, if you own a commercial property, anything along those lines, if that property is going to be impacted by a decision that you're making on this committee, then you have a financial interest and you have to look and see, do I need to recuse myself? It does not apply to a month-to-month leasehold. So if you are the tenant in a property, then that would not be considered a real property interest. And in terms of the jurisdiction, it includes the entire jurisdiction of the agency, not just your district that you were appointed to represent. And it goes 2 miles outside of the jurisdiction. So San Francisco plus 2 miles beyond that is where you'd be looking at to identify if you have a real property interest. You also have a financial interest in your sources of income. So think your employer, but it could also be something if you were, like, for example, if you were to sell your car to somebody and you sold your car for more than $500, that buyer of your car would be a source of income to you. So think a little bit expansively about income, but your sources of income are financial interests. And then also gifts.
Is it okay if I take a question from Member Milford Rosales? Member Milford Rosales.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just wanted to clarify that on the property standpoint, if you are a tenant with a lease that is longer than 1 month at a time, that is looked at the same as if you are a property owner.
No, I don't think that is what that means. I think, do you mean like if it's a 2-year lease, but you pay month to month? Like,
just the way it says including leaseholds and then says month to month leases are not considered real property interests. That seems like it implies to me that like a 1-year lease would be a property interest, which seems kind of wild.
Oh, I
To be
see.
considered the same as a property.
Yeah, no, I mean, this might be worded a little bit awkwardly. If you right, if you're in a 1-year lease, or I think 2-year lease is the maximum under California law, but you're paying month to month, that's what that's intended to be.
Okay,
So,
got it.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, that's a great question. And then another financial interest is any source of gifts to you. So that would be just what it sounds like, a tangible gift would be a source of a potential conflict of interest. And then finally, your personal finances. So if a decision could have an effect on your personal finances, then that would be a financial interest as well. So those are the core financial interests that you want to be looking for when there's a matter that you're voting on. And if the subject of the vote like is one of your financial interests or could potentially be financially affected by the decision, that's when you want to pause and reach out to Maria and Amy and seek for input and see if you'll be able to vote. One important thing to note is that it isn't the fact that you have a financial interest involved in a decision or potentially implicated in a decision that is the end of the analysis. Every different type of financial interest has to be materially affected by your governmental decision, by your vote, before you are required to recuse yourself. And naturally, because lawyers wrote up these regulations, every financial interest is subject to a different standard. And real property is actually a really good example to show you how this might play out in real life. So if you have a vote in front of you and it will be near or close to a place where, let's say, you own a yogurt shop. So you know that you have a financial interest with real property. What you would be looking at to determine, well, can I vote or not? You'd be looking at, is it material? And under the applicable regulations, if the decision will be within 500 feet of your property, then it is presumptively material and you should recuse yourself from participating in that vote. If it is between 500 and 1,000 feet from the decision, then you're looking at more factors. Will the vote increase the income generating potential from your property, or will it negatively impact the highest and best use of your property? So you're looking at a more multifaceted, through a more multifaceted lens. But if your property is more than 1,000 feet away from the decision, then the law creates a presumption that the effect will not be material and you can go ahead and vote. There are, of course, exceptions. These are all fact-driven inquiries and analyses, but this is just to kind of walk you through how to think through when you see something on an agenda and you think, oh gosh, that might affect one of my financial interests. We'll be going through steps like this to reach that conclusion. So I'll pause there. So again, just to recap on the conflict of interest, identify if you have a financial interest. If you do, definitely reach out to Maria or Amy so we can go through that analysis and determine if you are required to recuse yourself. Sometimes the optics are such that you may want to recuse yourself, but we will help navigate if you're actually required to. So I'm going to move on from this part of the presentation and talk about gifts and the ethics rules around accepting gifts. But before I do, I wanted to see if there are any other questions on the conflict of interest portion. Okay. Great. Okay, so we're shifting gears a little bit now, and now we're talking about gifts. So a gift is generally anything that has value that you receive and for which you do not provide equal consideration. So somebody buys you dinner and you don't pay for your share of the meal. That would be a gift. Somebody invites you to a Giants game. They give you tickets. You don't pay them back. That would be a gift. So under the TA code and the CAC rules, gifts are not prohibited. So what we're talking about are best practices, both to maintain the highest ethical professionalism and also to avoid the appearance of impropriety as well. So the best practices include not accepting, avoiding, or rejecting gifts from persons or entities who are actively seeking business or contracts from the TA. If you are invited out to dinner with somebody who's seeking a contract or maybe interested in getting funding, then it's recommended that you pay for your own way if the meal is lavish. And here we define lavish as being a meal worth $100 or more, or any gift worth $100 or more. What you should not feel the need to avoid would be gifts that are provided based on your personal relationships that have nothing to do with your role on the CAC. So, for example, the person who wants to buy a ticket for you to go to the Giants game with you, if it's somebody that you went to college with and you've stayed friends for all of those years and it's catching up with a college friend, of course you can accept the ticket in that case. If there's not even the appearance that that person would be trying to improperly influence you, you're just catching up with a friend. So those types of gifts that just are wholly unrelated to the position that why you're sitting here right now, those aren't what we're concerned about. So a quick hypothetical to test everybody's learning so far. So if the CAC is scheduled to vote on a motion of support to approve a professional services contract with Acme Bay Area at its next meeting, that's the scenario. 3 days before that meeting, Acme Bay Area's government affairs representative invites CAC member Bronin out for dinner and drinks. And once they're done eating, offers to pick up the tab, and the total value of the meal and drinks is $300, so $150 per person. Question 1, does member Bronin have a conflict if they accept Acme's offer to pay for their $150 meal? Yes. Great. Okay. I love to see the vigorous nodding. Yes. Very good. Well, then in that case, what steps, if any, should member Bronin take? Pay for his own meal? Yes. Or don't go to the dinner, right? Yeah, absolutely. You can go and pay your own way. That would certainly get around any gift issues or ethics issues. But, given how close you are to that vote, going a step further, taking optics into consideration would certainly be declining to go to dinner at all. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if you do find that you've identified that you potentially have a conflict, the recommended procedure is to notify the clerk at least 24 hours prior to the vote. As you could see a few moments ago, there are a lot of steps that have to be gone through to figure out if the potential conflict can be navigated. And then on the day of the meeting, when the agenda item is read, raise your hand and state that you will be recusing yourself from the discussion and vote due to a conflict of interest. If you will recuse yourself from participating in the vote, state abstain when the vote is called, and then also do not participate in the agenda item discussion. It's also a good idea if you are abstaining because of a potential conflict, just for full public transparency, to identify what your financial interest is. For example, real property, that's my employer, something along those lines. I do want to take a moment and just reiterate that these types of abstentions for potential conflicts really should be driven by a financial interest that could be affected by your decision. As you could see, there is a very detailed analysis that goes into confirming if there is a conflict, and there are also, which we simply don't have time to go into for tonight's presentation, many exceptions that apply, that even when a financial interest is identified, exceptions that might still allow you to vote. So I would just urge you all not to default to abstaining. But that's why getting in contact with Amy with enough advanced warning so that you can vote and do so confidently, because you're here, you're all spending a lot of time here. Obviously this is a very thoughtful group of people. And so the best way to represent your constituents is to participate as much as you are legally entitled to do. So we're going to go over now, switch gears to go over one of the open meeting laws, which is the Brown Act. I guess I'll pause again just to see if the chair's identified any other questions. Okay.
Yeah, Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a, like we are from the each district, so sometimes item comes up very district specific. I have a business on Gary Boulevard. Sometimes a lot of project happening along the Gary. Gary Boulevard is huge. In that case, do we have to excuse ourselves, or what should we? Sometimes, like District 2 or District 3, very specific subjects come, and how can we handle those situations?
Well, one thing, and that's a really great and important question, because the analysis is on what your financial interest is and maybe where your financial interest is located. And that isn't broken up by the different districts that you all are appointed to represent. So did I hear you say you have a business on Gary?
Yeah.
Okay. So you would look to, if the vote is on something that would impact within 500 feet of your business, then you would want to recuse yourself from voting. If it's more than 1,000 feet, then you aren't required to recuse yourself from voting. So for your property, you would be looking within how far away it is from your property or the business that you own. But for other decisions, you're really just looking at whether or not there will be a financial impact on that financial interest, regardless of where in the which district they're
Yeah,
in.
but my question is, normally we have some Gary improvement project. Is a huge section. For example, Aguelo to 32nd district, and then MTA formed the CAC because from the business from along the Gary. So we have interest, but we join those CAC, and then we kind of represent. At the same time, we express our concerns. But here, for example, sometimes Gary Boulevard is a very long stretch,
Mhm.
like subway. Today we're talking about 2050 plus, and then or normally planning here, transportation planning happen along the street, like whole Gary. So I'm in front of Gary. So any project related to Gary, I have to excuse myself. I don't know. Then I shouldn't be here.
Well, no, again, yeah, and I understand. So that again, excellent question, because it allows us to illustrate how one of the exceptions would work. So say we get to the point where we say, okay, because the decision will affect all of Gary, so your property will be affected. One of the exceptions is that the effect on your financial interest will be indistinguishable from the effect on every other business on Gary Boulevard. That would be the type of exception where we say, okay, you can go ahead and participate. So we'd want to look at the particular vote, for example. But yeah, I mean that's again a really great fact pattern to illustrate how granular these potential conflicts are. But also, we weren't able to get into the exceptions in this presentation, and I think what you described is where we'd probably be able to land on an exception so you can vote, because the laws aren't intended to make it so that everybody affected can vote.
Thank you.
Okay. So on the next and final portion of the ethics training, this is a refresher on the Brown Act. I think everybody here is probably pretty familiar with it, having sat on this body for some of you for 4 years. The Brown Act is California's primary open meetings law for local agencies, and this governs the way that public agencies operate open so that the public understands how the local agency is reaching its decisions and is able to have a real-time lens into the deliberative process that's being made into those decisions. So the basic rule is that all meetings of a legislative body must be open to the public, must be properly agendized, meaning that action items are presented as action items so that you could take action on them. Information items are presented as information items. This informs the public so that they know if they should come to a meeting or not, and they can participate. One of the traps for the unwary when it comes to meetings is that you can have a meeting inadvertently, even if it isn't showing up here in this room. So if a quorum of committee members get together and talk about committee business, you will have had a meeting, even if you didn't intend to, but that meeting will be in violation of the Brown Act. So you do want to be very careful about that. You can, however, do things like go to educational conferences together, as long as you're careful, again, not to discuss business that's within the jurisdiction of your committee. Another thing that you want to be very careful about is how quickly an email can become a meeting at which decision-making is happening, which would be a violation of the Brown Act. So one of our recommendations is don't email all members of the committee at the same time. Don't reply and add members of the committee, because you could inadvertently start a conversation that becomes deliberative, and thus becomes a meeting that didn't happen in compliance with the Brown Act requirements. You can, of course, meet with your fellow committee members one-on-one. That would not be a violation of the Brown Act, or with less than a majority. But again, one of the, or another trap for the unwary would be if you're deliberating with one member and then going to another member and letting them know, hey, I talked to member A and they're going to vote this way. I'm going to vote that way. And then you convince board member C to vote that way too. You're actually creating what's called a serial meeting. And again, that would not be in compliance with the Brown Act. So you want to be careful if you are communicating with fellow committee members on official matters in front of the committee. So at the meeting themselves, as I mentioned, you need to have the meeting properly agendized. You can only talk about matters that are on the agenda. You can only take action on items that are phrased as action items unless there's a vote by the board to add an item. But this is very, very, very limited exception for emergencies, and that is narrowly construed. And agendas have to be posted at least 72 hours before the meeting. I believe that our practice is to post them on the Friday before Wednesday meetings typically. So, the public has plenty of time to be informed. And again, meetings have to be open to the public. The public has to be provided an opportunity to provide input and to speak. And as a general rule, the meetings must be held in the jurisdiction of the agency. Social media, of course, has been changing the way a lot of things are done. One of the things that has been an issue that the legislature has grappled with is how members of a legislative body are communicating with each other over social media. And this law has been in place for a couple of years now, but when members are communicating, or actually members may not communicate with each other over social media when the topic of conversation is matters that are in the jurisdiction of the agency. And this actually includes liking or hearting or providing, putting a little emoji to another board member's comment. So you could use your own social media page to talk to your constituents about your own priorities, your policy preferences, updates to the community. Social media is a great way to keep your constituents informed about what happened in meetings, what you're doing in the community. But you just have to be careful not to like and comment on each other's updates about what is happening here at the CAC. You are allowed to talk to other board members on social media about purely personal things. So if somebody has a really cute beagle, you can heart the beagle photo. That would not be a violation of the Brown Act. If there is a violation of the Brown Act, the penalties, typically the most frequent one would be requiring the vote to be redone in a meeting that has complied with the Brown Act, but there can be criminal sanctions for willful and knowing violations. There can also be civil penalties imposed against the agency. And the Brown Act is one of those statutes that does provide for mandatory attorney's fees to the prevailing plaintiff, which is never fun. So we certainly want to be careful in that regard. And that concludes the presentation this evening. I'm happy to take any other questions that anybody didn't get in.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Does anyone have any other questions for Ms. Maltby? And if not, we can take any public comment in the room if there is any. Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's no remote public comment for this item.
All right, great. Well, this is an information item and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Moving to item 6, adopt a motion of support to approve the state and federal legislative update. This is an action item, and Amber Crabb, Senior Public Policy Manager, is here with us to present this item.
Thank you very much. You get 2 Ambers in one night. That's a rarity. I also have Martin Reyes is available online to help with this presentation if needed. So happy it's an action item this month. We can do that because of the second action of the board happening next week. So we'll get to weigh into that decision. Just a quick update of where we are in the last months of the 2025-26 legislative session. The legislature is currently on recess, and then they'll get back and have very busy August. And then by August 31st, all the bills have to be out of the legislature. And then the governor has until September 30th to either sign, veto, or let the bill become law. So the state budget, I reported a little bit on this last month, but the state budget was approved by the end of the month in June, and work continues on trailer bills that will address a few key topics that were kind of left unaddressed. The one that we're very active on right now is a trailer bill that is expected to take up the recent cap and invest restructuring that essentially zeroed out key transit and affordable housing programs. So this is especially important for the portal that is seeking $750 million of multi-cycle transit intercity rail capital projects, as well as SFMTA has both current and future projects that could be impacted. So both from what we heard at the end of June, both the Senate and the Assembly recognize the need to address this. And although it's really important to keep the pressure up to remind our legislators of the importance of public transit and how devastating these cuts could be. So we're working with partners across the region, across the state, within the city to try to really find a solution. So that's kind of what we're working on this month and through the end of August. And then the position that we're requesting action on today is on Senate Bill 1246. And this is a bill from Senator Cortese in the South Bay. We are seeking a support and seek amendments position, which is essentially a support position, but then authorizes us to go speak with the author and his staff about potential amendments that we'd like to see. So this is a bill that focuses on emergency response and first responder interactions with autonomous vehicles. It's meant to ensure that commercial AV manufacturers act quickly when emergency is reported, that they have trained personnel who are accountable, and that first responders have the resources they need to keep the public safe in the case of incidents involving the vehicles. So the bill started off being pretty extensive. It's now gone through a series of amendments that really focused it down to deal with first responder interactions. And so it currently does a number of things. It requires AV manufacturers to dispatch local incident technicians immediately upon requested. It requires that the commercial vehicles have the ability to either remotely or in person at the request of an emergency responder be put in neutral or turned off to make it allow towing to be possible. It also creates new civil penalties that allow city attorneys to bring a civil action, and the penalties, they can seek up to $5,000 per incident if kind of general AV regulations are violated, and then up to $10,000 per vehicle if there's an emergency related blockage that lasts longer than 30 minutes. A couple other provisions, it requires remote drivers to either have a US driver's license and to be located in the United States. And then the item we're seeking an amendment on is we're happy that it requires new emergency response data for manufacturers to collect. However, currently the requirement is just that they provide it upon request to the DMV or the Public Utilities Commission. And we're seeking an amendment that would make reporting mandatory on a quarterly basis, and then also make it publicly available so that we would also be able to see the data and it could inform future city action. So we have heard that despite the substantial narrowing of scope, industry is still opposing it. Supporters on record right now are mainly state labor organizations, including labor unions, highway patrolmen, firefighters, but we have heard that various other coalitions and public sector representatives are also discussing the measure this month. So we would be out in front on this. So as a reminder, the action we're seeking is to recommend a support and seek amendments position on SB 1246.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Levine.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see that that a support position has been taken on this bill. It's definitely a step forward, but I'm still very disappointed that there is still no ability for local authorities to enforce traffic laws, violations, which are key, I think, to any kind of local I guess, local involvement in the decision making, and that's really a big gap that needs to be filled. And I don't know where the next step would go to enhance that portion of the bill. One other area that you might look for support is construction contractors. Next door to where I live, there's been a contractor that's been building a house there. He does a lot of other work, but he has complained to me on a regular basis about the AVs get into situations, construction zones, and they can't figure out where to go. They block the construction vehicles from coming in and out, and they don't know what to do. So I would think that would be a ready-made group that would be very supportive of any legislation.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that suggestion. And as far as looking forward, there's a new legislative session starting in December, and we're already in the process of developing the state and federal work program and legislative program for next year. And so we are trying to think big about, what else is needed. Even if this passes, you're right, there's a lot of other issues that need to be addressed, and we'd love to see a stronger local role over the impacts to our environment. Yeah.
That's maddening to me. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you.
Member Ortega.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. In light of our recent ethics training, I think I will need to abstain from this vote because my husband works for a self-driving company and I have a married interest in self-driving. We can talk more. I think I will talk more later with the team and the chair about sort of where that places me. But I just would like to be very upfront that there is a financial interest in my house in how AV does. And if this bill is being opposed and has probably financial impact on them, that probably has a financial impact on my husband. And it's a little bit more complicated. And I think that's a conversation that I would like to have, not in the middle of this meeting, for fairness to everyone else. So, thank you.
Thanks for flagging that, Member Ortega. Member Bars.
Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions, one on SB 1246, and then I was hoping that you could give me a little bit of an explainer on the budget trailer bill, SB 1216. I know that's not the action item, but I have a question about that too. Okay. So on 1246 is like, we just had the 4th of July. That was a bit chaotic on our streets, to say the least. That did not go so great. And there were, I believe this is reported, that there were autonomous vehicles that got stuck and couldn't move. I think this is true. I hope this is true. I'm not entirely sure. Is the intent that when that happens, you need to give the responders more control so that they don't just block the streets? Is that the intent of this bill?
Well, I think the current version of the bill precedes the July 4th event. I don't want to speculate. I think the city's still doing a kind of postmortem on July 4th. But yes, my understanding is also that there were some vehicle blockages that happened. I'm not sure if this would have helped because the tow trucks would have had to get there. Just wanting to take a step back right now, we have one or two, I think two major AV manufacturers on the street that we see around. This legislation isn't just about one or two of them. It's about, in 2 or 3 years when there's 20 of them on the road, the idea of having first responders. I think the way that I've heard our chief refer to it is we're not AAA, but at a minimum, we need to be able to move the vehicles. But of course, the tow truck has to get there. I think it's complicated, and this is really kind of a first step of common sense solutions, hopefully. But I think definitely the mayor released a letter, I think on July 16th, to the state outlining what he would like to see as far as a response to help in the future resolve or not have those incidents continue to occur. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I love these new cordless mics. You can just hold. This is great. Everybody should do this. Take advantage of these new mics, everyone. Okay. Thank you for your answer. That really helps. I just wanted to clarify in my mind, like the problem that this is solving. And I think that comment about first responders not being AAA is a very fair one. So, okay. Thanks. Okay. On to SB 1216.
Yes.
So this one's a complicated one. I want to make sure that I'm following this one. So we passed the budget, and in that budget, there was still some open-ended question, or there was vagueness, I guess, ambiguity about the cap and invest funds, right? The cap and trade funds that we have that get invested into things like high-speed rail, thank you, Member Ford, or like our train control project here in SFMTA. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what the tier 3 program funding would fund. And so the Air Resources Board essentially decided not to collect revenues that would be the tier 3 program. Do I have that correct?
They redid how cap and invest is collected and on whom, and that reduced funding that was available. And because the funding was reduced, the expenditure plan last year was rewritten to be this waterfall effect, where these, like, off the top, there's public safety programs, there's funding that goes to the legislature for discretionary appropriation, there's funding that goes to high-speed rail, and then there's kind of everything else. And the transit capital, transit operating, affordable housing funding, that all fell into the like everything else category. So everything gets funded before that. So unfortunately, it didn't exactly like take the funding away from transit and give it to refineries, but you know, the effect is by shrinking the funding, less is available to fund the programs down the line in the waterfall.
Okay, that's a bummer. So and the bill that has been added to the watch list, AB 1216, would essentially in the legislature approve that approach. So like essentially have the effect of zeroing out the type 3 funding for for example, the train control replacement project at MTA. Am I understanding that correctly?
CARB was able to act unilaterally to make that decision. The expenditure plan was approved last year by the legislature, but CARB had the power to make that decision to change how much money is collected. They did that on their own. So what the legislature is trying to do is look at, okay, given, and also cap and invest is not like a steady fund source. It also depends on auctions. So it's a really unpredictable fund source that's really hard to forecast. So so what the legislature is trying to do is and what SB 1216 does is basically put a pin in the distribution until somehow we can work out, hopefully, to get some of these tier 3 programs funded. I think the big question is, where does that funding come from? If we know that the funding from Cap and Invest is going to be lower than it was when the expenditure plan was written.
Okay, got it. So CARB acted to say we're collecting the funds in such a way that we're reducing the amount of money that will come in.
Yeah.
And now this is an attempt to be like, Okay, well, maybe we should rethink what's going to get the money. Is that correct? Okay,
That's-
thank you.
yes,
That's very
that's
helpful.
correct.
Okay, understood.
Member Margarita.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I just had a question regarding SB 1246. There was actually an incident recently with a resident in District 9, and she was having a stroke. And there was an autonomous, vehicle blocking the actual ambulance. So the emergency responders couldn't get to her due to the autonomous vehicle blocking, and she had to walk while she's having a stroke. Mind you, in the moment, she didn't even know she was having a stroke. It became apparent, and she was hospitalized, and she's okay now. She's okay. But will this bill be retroactive to, or is it going to be once it's passed, then from then on? Okay.
Yeah, the bill is not meant to be retroactive.
Okay. Thank you. But I appreciate that it's moving forward.
Yeah, I'm glad she's okay.
I'm glad she's okay as well. Yeah. And I hope that doesn't ever happen to anyone, because that was a very scary situation. Yeah.
Member Baumgarten.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the presentation. Really cool and very interesting and important topic. I have kind of two questions. I think the first on capturing incident information. Obviously, kind of hard to go through all the very gritty details, but I'm kind of a preliminary question. Is there in this bill an avenue provided to the public to report any incidents that might not have been self-reported by the autonomous vehicle company?
No, I haven't seen anything in the bill that would allow that.
Yeah. I thought that was probably the case. I think it would be, just knowing what I've seen in my neighborhood, I think that would be a really beneficial thing to provide or request or mandate that the companies work into either like apps or their platforms, because what incentive do these companies have to like self-report? Obviously, I think this is focused on the first responders. They would be capturing this information. But if things were to like go, a little bit awry. And then I think one sort of considering going to seek amendments and requests. I know I'm sure there's a lot of barriers to getting this passed from industry and whatnot, but I found it very interesting that cities and counties have to sue in order to receive the amounts due, and between the amounts of $1,000 and $10,000, which I can't really imagine goes far in the way of covering the labor cost of city employees and whoever does that work. I'm sure there would be vehement objection, but I could see it being a huge benefit and appropriate recompense to the community to save those resources and expenditures and have fees like that be an automatic penalty. If you get a red card in the World Cup, you got to pay the fine. Why can't the vehicles do the same?
Yeah, the original language did not require a civil suit in order to seek penalties, but that was an amendment that did make it into the bill.
Member Milford Rosales.
So similarly in line, but also thank you very much for the presentation. I know I've been bugging with you and Martin about this basically every time it's come up. Similar to Member Baumgarten's comment question, I wrote down that you mentioned it was it'd be a 5,000 default penalty, but then it would go up to $10,000 per vehicle for something that lasts more than 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think I could pull the language, but it's up to 5,000 for violation of AV regulations, which could be, any number of things that AVs are required to do or not do, but the $10,000 is specifically for blocking emergency vehicles for more than 30 minutes from when help is called for, essentially.
So, I guess my kind of question was, do we know, like, has this been negotiated up to 30 minutes already, or is there an opportunity to negotiate that number down? Because I mean, this past Saturday we had another AV outage, and I was walking to the Valkyries game and saw an AV that went out in front of the Mission Bay Branch Library, that caused a traffic jam that blocked the T. And I stood there for 3.5 minutes videoing it as T's were piling up and people couldn't get off of the platform. That seems like a major incident. But since it was not 30 minutes, there are many places and situations where it doesn't take that long to park and block traffic for it to have serious consequences that take a lot of time to unwind, best case, or that could impact someone that's having an actual emergency. Is there any opportunity to change that threshold from 30 minutes? Because that's basically, I mean, even for the 4th of July situation, I think the only vehicles that stayed out overnight were the ones that's batteries died. But generally speaking, they're able to start towing and moving them quicker than that, even though it can still do a lot of damage.
Yeah, it is quite late with all the bills needing to get back to their house of origin and then out of the legislature by the end of August. We can definitely raise that with the author. However, I like to think of this as kind of the first step. I don't, you can go back online and look at where the bill started, the language, and now where it is through the amendment process. But yeah, I'm personally, we can convey interest, and I'm personally focused on what's next. Like, this is important, but what's the next thing we should be focusing on?
So overall, incredibly excited that one of the biggest things that many of us have talked about, requiring U.S. driver's licenses and people in the United States, is part of this bill. I imagine that was probably a very difficult thing to get to, given the cost savings of their current operations and how that works. So I'm very excited to vote for this and hope it passes, and look forward to hearing about our next kind of steps and projects to try and get better regulation and even better regulation in place. The second kind of short question I had was, I know that there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the e-bike bills, various e-bike bills that have come up, and I was a little confused about the status of the one so I'm pulling up the number again of, I believe it was SB 1167. Is there a summary somewhere, or could that be just a thing that we could get emailed later about what the definitions are in place? Because I know at one point the definition in place for electric bicycles was covering literally every device with 2 wheels and a motor, or not literally, pretty close to it. Like, it would have functionally banned almost every kind of e-bike that exists, when the intent seems to be that everyone seems to agree on is, like, if it seems like a motorcycle, we want to ban it. If it has like a lower top speed limit and like a cargo rack that you're putting your kids on, that's fine. And like, I guess I'm just I was curious where that bill is at right now in terms of how strictly it's cracking down on everything versus how strictly it's cracking down on like the specific instances that actually tend to be dangerous.
Thank you. And I will actually, Martin, I see you popped up on the screen. I'll go ahead and turn this over to you.
Thanks, Amber, and good evening, CAC members. Martin Reyes, Principal Transportation Planner. Member Milford Gonzalez, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same bill. I think SB 1167 was Senator Blake Spear's bill, and this one was one that the TA took a support position on. This is the one that sort of clarifies what is and what is not an e-bike, and sort of establishes prohibitions on manufacturers selling things as e-bikes if they're not selling things from e-bikes that are not e-bikes. Is that the bill you're also referring to, or are you referring to
Okay, I
different
don't
bill?
I don't think it's the bill I was also referring to. Thank you. I
No
just
problem.
looked at the description there and then trying to read the main legal text. I was just like very confused trying to remember if this was the
Got
one
it.
that we'd already seen or not.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap, a lot of the e-bike legislation, if you'll remember, we were looking at maybe 10 bills sort of at the beginning of the session, covering a huge variety of issues related to e-bikes. Most of them have actually did not sort of make it through committee. Most of them died. So the two big e-bike bills that are still moving forward are the one that I just mentioned, Senator Blake Spears' SB 1167. There's also another bill from Assemblymember Wilson, but all of the other ones, there was an e-bike licensing bill and a couple of others. Those have died. They're not proceeding. If there is a bill that you're interested in, I'm happy to follow up with more information afterwards.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I have a couple of comments. First of all, just want to echo other members support the recommendation of the support position on 1246, support the requested amendments strongly. Also disappointed to see how watered down it has gotten, but hoping that this will be more of a starting point. And then on SB 1216, I just wanted to, I'm very grateful that the TA is has an eye on this and is working with stakeholders to see what can be done here. I'd like to urge our board to be louder on this issue and do whatever they can to make sure that the funding is secured for these programs. I'm very concerned about this. I want to flag for members that not only is like the portal and other important capital projects that SFMTA is planning, we're depending on this funding, but also there is $18 million worth of operations funding that Muni has been using for its free and discount fare programs, so Free Muni for Youth and the discount programs for seniors and people with disabilities. That's operations funding that we are sorely in need of right now. Muni might have to find other funding sources for that. They might have to make a decision as to whether to fund that versus existing service, right? So I'm just very concerned about making sure that all of these really important programs get funded, and grateful to the TA again for watching this and hoping that our board will also take strong action on this. So thank you very much. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Oh, the button.
Yeah, well, this thing's, oh.
Your
right now
2
it's green.
minutes begins now.
Thank you, Edward Mason. Just two general comments, not specifically, but I think that there should be legislation to license, whether they be bicycles, scooters, or anything else. On my way here, I got bombarded on 11th Street with scooters and a bicycle coming at me and another one behind me. I couldn't believe it. So it's just rampant and it needs to be licensed. Regarding autonomous vehicles, I would recommend that since they are using the public space as their research and development laboratory, that they should pay some type of fee to do that. Either that or go to Nevada and find 49 square miles and reconstruct San Francisco and do all the testing you want to do there. But it's getting to the point now where there's just so much disruption that they should be paying a fee to operate in the public space. So at least organizations can get reimbursed for having to go after all of these problems that they're getting involved in. So those are two general comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment for this item.
Great. Public comment is closed. May I have a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Milford Rosales, seconded by Member Bars. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 6, the state and federal legislative update, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Labaro? Labaro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, abstain.
Ortega, abstain. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 9 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks again to Ms. Crabb for the presentation. All right, we'll move to item 7, the San Francisco Transportation Plan 2050 Plus update. This is an information item, and we have Suwani Cho, Assistant Deputy Director for Planning, to present this item, which we had originally scheduled for earlier this spring, but ran out of time to discuss, I believe, at our April meeting. So thank you so much for returning this evening.
No need for 2 mics. I was just taking advantage of the cordless mic situation to move it closer. But Swanee is our main presenter tonight and the project manager for the SFTP Plus. But I wanted to offer some prefacing remarks just in partnership with our partner on this project and, of course, so many others, SFMTA, because this is a long-range plan. It covers a 30-year forecast period. And something important for us to disclose is that it has a projection of revenue and investment needs. And in that projection of revenue, it does make an assumption, which is consistent with what the region did for their recent long-range plan update, which is assume that something is found revenues to address the near-term, very serious fiscal crisis that our operators are in. And as you all know from your participation on this body, we together with state and regional and local elected officials and our partner agencies have worked to identify a couple sources at the regional level and here at the local level to address these near-term really serious fiscal gaps. But just be aware that the presentation that you'll see tonight does have an assumption built in it that those are addressed in some way by the voters. So thanks.
Thank you for the context.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Swanee Cho. I don't know how to share the slides. Okay, so I am going to I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly so we can get out of here on time. But this is, I'll do a quick recap of do a quick recap of the SFTP, talk about what we heard in our public outreach, describe to you our draft plan, and talk about some quick next steps. So the SFTP, as you all know, is the countywide 30-year blueprint for our transportation system. It covers 30 years. There's an investment plan that is financially constrained and a vision plan that considers potential new revenues. And we discuss strategic initiatives that also can inform how we deliver on our goals. And this SFTP with the topics we're looking into are autonomous vehicles, climate resilience, electrification, microtransit, and new revenues, which focuses on the idea of delivery fees as raised by Chair Siegel earlier and in the Muni Funding Working Group and other venues. And so this is coordinated with the Plan Bay Area, which was recently completed. Our last SFTP was updated in 2022. So this is a quick reminder of the 5 goals that we're always seeking to meet. So now we're working on this focused update of SFTP 2050. The update is driven by 3 things primarily, which we presented in detail last time we were here. I believe we were here last May. This update is coordinated with an update of Plan Bay Area. So that's the first reason. The second reason is what you see here, that our revenue projection for the next 30 years is lower, which means we need to adjust our investment plan. Based on regional estimates, we see that the long-term federal, state, and regional funding sources remain more or less the same as we had in SFTP 2050. And so here in the chart, you can see those are the 3 lower bands, the darkest colors. Where we see significant revenue reductions is in local sources, which is the lighter blue. That's driven by changes in travel behavior and remote work, which drive the local revenues down. And then in the yellow hatch, we're showing the new and anticipated new sources of revenues. And as Rachel mentioned, this is where we assume the funding for maintaining current transit service levels is assumed. And so even including the yellow hatch, we're seeing a 12% decrease in revenues from what we had 4 years ago. And so we know that this picture is continuing to fluctuate. And so we're planning to do a comprehensive major update of revenues in the next major update. The third driver for the focused update that we're doing is the change in travel patterns post-pandemic and updated projections for the future, which we also presented last summer. And this is just one highlights slide from that presentation that shows that while people are moving around less, there's a 41% drop in overall trips to, from, and within San Francisco. More of the trips are by driving and fewer trips by transit. And we also found that the lowest income, people at the lowest income level are more likely to drive alone, which is more of a burden. And here too, we know that the conditions are in flux because, since 2023, transit use has been increasing and munis getting very favorable ratings more lately. But we also know that congestion is still getting worse and is in many areas back to pre-pandemic levels. And in addition, we expect that the San Francisco's population and jobs will grow over the next 30 years. And so we need to plan for that growth. And I think the finding being that these travel patterns and this kind of mode share is not sustainable as we grow significantly. So last summer, we presented all this data and travel about travel behaviors and decreased revenues. And we had a number of community meetings, we had town halls, and we did that again this past spring. We met with 26 community organizations and had virtual town halls, and we had a couple of different surveys. And in summary, I think we heard a wide range of comments, but we heard a lot of support for transit, both reliability and expansion, and heard about the need for safety improvements. And there were some folks that did express concern about the fact that they felt driving in the city was becoming more difficult. So in the survey that we did last summer, we did this online survey in English, Chinese, Filipino, and Spanish, and we heard from people over 2 months. And we asked 3 questions. The first was whether folks agreed with our approach to prioritize funding for transit operations and maintaining a state of good repair. And there we were happy to see that 63% agreed with that approach. The second question had to do with limited resources. And given limited resources, residents ranked safer streets for all as the highest priority. And the second most popular choice was incentivizing transit, biking, and walking. And the third was to invest in new major transit projects. The third question we asked about priorities if funding was unlimited. And here, the first choice by far was making transit more frequent, reliable, safe, and clean. This was ranked as the top choice for 46% of people, and 85% had it in their top 3. So this past spring, as I mentioned, we did our second round of outreach, and we reported on that first round findings, and we solicited input on the vision plan, so we can set ourselves up for additional revenues beyond what we are projecting in this update. So we're still going through that in detail, but generally what we heard was sort of echoing what we heard in the first round. Strong support for transit and support for traffic calming and multimodal safety projects. So using that feedback and technical analysis, we shape our investment plan. And here, what you see on the screen is the investment plan that was in SFTP 2050. It added up to $80 billion. And then this is the current illustrative investment plan with a 12% lower revenue. So it's at 69. And if I sort of toggle back and forth, you can see how we are maintaining the transit operations and paratransit and streets and freeways maintenance, and the other categories of spending do decrease as required. But then we also are shaping our vision plan. And this is the next set of projects and programs that we would want to prioritize when new revenues arise. And previously, we heard loud and clear that improving and expanding transit service was a priority. So we would increase transit funding. We would increase funding for transit operations. And this would be above and beyond the revenues that we're assuming to sustain the current level of service. And there's more funding here for transit maintenance, which also helps reliability of transit and safety. So the vision plan does include funding in all of these categories, as you can see in the hatch. So if we can find the additional funds called for in the vision plan, we would have much improved outcomes. Transit would be improved. We could have new express or rapid service, for example, so that buses are less crowded. There could be new routes between neighborhoods, so you wouldn't have to transfer. And transit priority measures could help buses arrive on schedule. And we could also invest in more things that make transit more convenient and comfortable, like enhanced elevators or better wayfinding signage. And all of this helps, we're always keeping our eyes on the goals. And these are improvements that would help environmental sustainability, but also economic vitality. We would also be able to fund more robust transit service in equity priority communities where more people are more transit dependent. And so, but it could also include things like beefed up aisle service that help anyone who need transit late at night or early in the morning. And this obviously goes to our goal of equity, but also economic vitality and environmental sustainability. The vision plan would also help us invest in things that make our streets safer, things like traffic calming that reduces vehicle speeds, curb ramps, crosswalks, signals, and these are improvements that go towards our goal of safety and livability. And we can also do better maintenance, fix more potholes and better streets would help everyone who uses our streets, going towards economic vitality, safety and livability, and accountability. So in summary, this focused update with the reduced investment plan and the vision plan helps us adjust to our current situation, but and confirm our priorities, but it also helps us advance our shared goals and sets us up for the next major update. Finally, we're working to synthesize all the feedback in our technical work, and we expect to have a draft plan in the early fall. We'll come back to the CAC to present that plan and go for board adoption in the fall. So that is my presentation. There are a couple of appendix slides that are attached to this that we thought might be helpful in if you want to get into sort of more detail about the fiscal cliff and what's happening there. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ford.
Thanks very much for the presentation. I just wanted to clarify, is the outcome, like when you say this is our plan, option 2, or let's see, investment plan with $80 billion, is the intention that this then becomes like a distributional guideline that says from 2050 onward, we want 67% of all of these funds to be transit operation, and then
it's from now
break from there
until 2050, and it sets forth our priorities, but it doesn't sort of commit funds to any particular project or program. But
so it doesn't commit funds proportionally to the priorities either.
I mean, it does. It's based on need. So the total bar, it represents the need that we have. And then we are proposing to, fund it at, nearly, I don't have the percentages off the top of my head, but I don't know if that answers your question.
I just got back from a work trip up to Seattle where we had to do our annual plan. And the annual plan started with my boss being like, okay, well, we got these goals. And now we're going to go do some things that make the goals better. And I feel like this sort of is like that, where like you're like, I got these goals. We got transportation reliability, but I'm not really seeing like the what are we going to do to make transportation reliable plan, given that it's called the transportation plan.
Well, this is a long-term funding plan, so it doesn't get into that level of detail, but it does, like in transit maintenance, for example, that if you the next level is Muni, BART, Caltrain, and it does assign large dollar figures, but it's over the next 30 years, 25 years.
Maybe another thing to share about this is that the need is in many ways built, and also the investment side is in many ways built up from individual projects or packages of projects. So for example, within transit maintenance and rehab, there are breakdowns for what each operator needs, and then within that, what each operator needs for fleet, for buildings, for electrical, for all of the different types. And then within major transit projects, for example, that's broken down into network-wide, sort of system-wide improvements that Muni has. For example, their program for Muni Rapid, so the whole thing. The Bayview Caltrain station, infill station, for example, as a discrete project. Build out of the bike and roll network, for example, as a discrete project. So there's estimates for those types of network-wide needs, what the cost estimate of what it will take for DPW to maintain their pavement rating. And so both the cost estimate side, and Maria's team actually does this. So Maria, you may want to elaborate, works with all of our agency partners to build up estimates of their needs over the 30-year period. And then the revenue side, or the the need, then the investment side is actually connected to milestones related to how much of that need, at what types of milestones can we achieve. So there is a lot more sort of build up on each part than is shown here in this summary.
All right, apologize for taking this too long. Okay, so then underneath this, there is to some extent a list of projects that are planned that are cost estimated and stack ranked and categorized per our goals. And then you're drawing a line that's like, here's how far we can get against our list of need given the money.
Yeah, I think there are some projects that are called out specifically, but then a lot of the spending is in sort of programs because we don't call out like individual curb ramps, for example. But curb ramps.
No, those are excellent answers. This is always super confusing, especially if you're used to like at work or at home, you have a budget and you're like, here's my money and I'm going to put $100 in this and $200 in that. And you know what you're lining it up with. So this is what we're doing, what Swanee and Rachel are describing is our 30-year investment vision for what San Francisco should look like, just like Plan Bay Area that MTC does the 9 Bay Area counties. Two things to keep in mind is the vast majority of the money is already basically pre-committed to things. For instance, all of that transit operations money, not all of it, but almost all of it is money that goes to transit operators, meaning Caltrain for operations, and we can't really redirect it elsewhere. So the discretionary piece of the pie is the pretty small piece that we get to direct. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So we're really mucking with of the money we can play with. Where do we want to put it? The other key thing is this is it is a plan, but it is not like a programming document where I am handing out different dollar amounts to each of you for specific projects, with a few exceptions like the portal or like the Bayview Caltrain station. I think that they mentioned everything is in these big buckets because you don't really know what media forward project you're going to do for 30 years. So I hope that helps a little bit, but this is kind of our overarching vision and guide. And then as we come to you and do different calls for projects through sales tax or One Bay Area grant, we reference this for the priorities, and that sort of influences what we do going forward.
Member Bars.
I'm gonna pick up the thread. It's my last time. So okay, I have a really basic question. Why do we do this long range plan?
In part, it is a requirement. What we do with at the county level feeds into the regional Plan Bay Area, which is the what MTC just recently completed, and so we take sort of input from them in terms of growth projections and revenue projections. We set up our plan and define what our priorities are, and then this feeds back into the regional plan. And there are certain, projects have to be in the regional plan for to qualify for some funding pots, for example.
And I love, sorry, just super quick, and then Rachel could jump in. This was a minor update, so not the most exciting. Perhaps it is also a very uncertain time, as Chair Siegel set us up previously about funding for transit and lots of things. When we do the major updates, it will be a lot more interesting for many reasons, but a couple updates, a few updates ago, we have used this plan to guide things like reauthorization of a prior sales tax, and that led to Prop K. So I imagine most likely next time with the next major update, we will probably be looking at some revenue sources that we would use this plan to inform, like local revenue sources. Okay, so we do this. A 30-year plan is like a long time, like I much like my colleague member Ford, I maintain an annual roadmap. Recently, we've been asked to jump to a 3 to 5 year look ahead. I support this. By the way, I'm on team 3 to 5 year look ahead, but yes, 30 years is like really long. So
I think that it is a funny, thank you, Director Lombardo, is a funny thing to wrap your head around. So, but just to make sure that I'm grasping, the reason why we do this exercise is because the regional transportation plan requires it of us. And that is led by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is required to do that because of state and federal law. Do I have that correct?
You do. And one other thing that we do here at the county level that may be of interest to you all is that we are the plan that does this, that brings together all of the modes and all of the operators, because every operator on their own will do this, a 5-year exercise of a capital improvement plan, or sometimes their practices do vary. But this is the place where all of those modal needs and operators all come together, including our Caltrans, needs, for example, and then we can do this prioritization even across modes and operators. Yeah.
Okay, super. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we have a funding vision. Now, my next question is about what. So you did this outreach, and the outreach said some things that I'm guessing reinforced things we already knew. Like, for example, the good people of San Francisco really want transit to be reliable, fast, and good, and that seems to be pretty backed up in the data, right? So what changed about the plan as of right now, or you're thinking about this plan with respect to the outreach that you heard?
So the main change, if you see the figures, is that we're trying to deal with the lower revenue because the investment plan is supposed to be financially constrained. And I think how the outreach feedback influenced us was that we made sure that it helped us keep the transit operations at as high level as possible, because that was something we heard from the public. We also kept the streets and freeways maintenance at sort of where it was 4 years ago. That is something that in theory could have been trimmed a little bit, but because we heard that like concern about driving and like infrastructure maintenance, that was something that supported how the draft plan shaped up. And then I think one thing we heard, because we heard so much support for transit and especially things like reliability, it helps us shape the vision plan, because obviously right now where I think for the first time in many years we're in a position of having to cut back, but the needs stayed the same, and so it sort of influenced how much proportionately we would invest in transit maintenance in the vision plan.
Okay, so just to make sure that I'm following. So you heard this feedback from the surveys and the sessions, the town halls, excuse me, and the way that we tweaked these amounts allocated in the constrained plan was to sort of do our best to max out the money for transit operations, maintain the level of streets, freeways, maintenance, rehabilitation, replacement, and the third thing I think I missed, maybe transit maintenance as well.
Paratransit was the third one we kept constant.
Okay, and then others took reductions. Got it. Okay, okay, so now I think this might be my last comment as a CAC member. So I'm not gonna like go out swinging, but I will say that District 7 is a big district, a diverse district. We really represent a lot of the views, I think, across the city as transportation goes. I think that the feedback that you probably heard would represent the views echoed in District 7. I That said, I am not sure I would have made those decisions representing the interests of District 7. Not that I am against any of those things, but that I read this feedback and I see a demand for more reliance on more, better, bigger transit. And that's like the top priority that's jumping out to me. And so the way that I'd interpret that is yes, maintaining what we have, that's true, but actually throwing more money at new stuff. And the fact that like that wasn't your decision, I'm not sure that I would agree with that choice and would, urge over like urge taking those decisions to this body actually to discuss like, okay, this is the feedback that we're hearing. I want to socialize this and the options with what we could do with it with the CAC. So that's what I'll say. Thank you for your explanation. That was extremely helpful to me. I went in here into this meeting questioning the point of this exercise, and I have come out with actually, oh, this is important to do. So thank you very much. And just in the future, I would encourage you to take the members of the CAC through that decision-making process about what to tweak.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Your comment is really actually a great way for me to talk about how we would do that properly in a major update. So it's a great question. And what I hear you talking about is a demand for major transit expansions. So for example, there are some major transit expansions that are included in a way in the long range plan. There's 5 of them. And where they came from was the last major update. So that was the update that was approved by our board in 2022. And because that was one of these major efforts, we worked with MTA, the planning department, the city, to do what was called the transit strategy, San Francisco Long Range Transit Strategy. We also did one for streets and freeways as well. But as the transit strategy version identified the top 5 major transit expansion priorities for the city and county of San Francisco. And those are included to varying degrees in the investment scenario. So things like the portal, which has been positioned for a long time as a top priority at the regional level and at other levels of government, is funded. In the past, things like Caltrain electrification were one of these, and now that's achieved. Van Ness BRT was one. So some of the others that are included to lesser extents include the Geary 19th subway, the Central Subway extension to North Beach. Those are included in the investment scenario, not as fully built though. And that's also even true for the Caltrain Bayview station. Is another one, is the Caltrain Bayview station, and that's in for a certain amount of funds. In the investment scenario, as Swanee mentioned, we did fully fund that project. But there are these others, and both of the 2 subway extensions I mentioned are not fully funded there. There's a down payment on their continued advancement, but that's how those. So we are actually partnering, as we do, right? MTC does this for the 9-county Bay Area, and then we need to do the same for San Francisco, is launching this fall their next major update, where they're going to, and this is the opportunity to rethink, reopen that question that you're talking about as what are the top transit expansion priorities for San Francisco. And so we're not quite on their timeframe, we're maybe some quarters behind. But we will also be launching a major update, which will actually, I can say that we already know that our board wants us to consider the question of major transit expansion priorities. Yeah. So thank you so much for that question. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for your response.
Member Ortega.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. I have to agree with members Ford and members Bars. Also thank them for their excellent questions. They asked quite a lot that I had. I do want to echo member Bars's note about major transit. have recently had to start driving a lot more in San Francisco because I cannot find transit reliable. Like it is not a option and a viable thing for my current lifestyle, and I really hate it. Um, so I think that that is something that really needs to be considered, and I would like to see in this next upcoming major overhaul, one thing I want is a complete relook at all of Muni routes and to change how downtown centric the Muni routes are, given the fact that downtown is not where a majority of the people live. And we are not having a commerce built society where people go to the office and then they go to the suburbs, which is what was the Sunset and other places. I think we need to have a much, much stronger look at getting rid of a downtown centric view of transit. And I understand now that that could not be included in the scope of this project, but there are lots of studies that show that from an equity standpoint, downtown centric transit favors working class men. So we need to change that. I think as a society, as a city, I think, where I'm going, the odds of me going downtown very low. The odds of me going lots of other places in the city from my neighborhood very high. And I think that I would want to see at least some conversation about that. Additionally, I have another hard question to ask, which is you guys took down the budget, and also as Member Ford and Member Bars has brought up in previous meetings and in tonight, one of my questions is how detailed did we get into rates of inflation? How was that calculated? Talking about 30 years, that's a long time. We've seen record high inflation in the last couple years. Did we assume a baseline? Was that even accounted for? Next, population understanding, considering that we have a housing crisis going on right now. How was that accounted for? Like, were these like high level, like we use sort of the basic standard formulas, which is a fine thing. This wasn't thought about at all. Or like we use some mix based off of trends post-pandemic, but because the recovery trends in San Francisco have been so hard, this is sort of the best guess that we had.
Yes. Yes, thank you. There are a couple of parts to that answer, which is that this being a minor update, we didn't do the kind of the full ground up buildup of the costs and revenues. So this is sort of taking MTC's projections and applying them to San Francisco, and that's where we get the sort of 12% reduction. And so in the next major update, we'll be doing that, ground up work. And right now, the dollars are expressed in 2020 dollars, so it's sort of constant 2020 dollars. And again, in the next update, we'll be, I think, going to MTC's methodology, which is to express the costs and dollars in a year of expenditure. So that is work to come.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that'd be very helpful to make sure that that's called out and identified, because I feel like sometimes when we look at projects and we go, wow, that was way over budget, but the budget was originally written in 1999. Of course, it was over budget. So I think that that would be helpful. I also have another very sort of maybe unpleasant question, but I think something that we need to consider here, which is internal understanding and potential cost reduction. And I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about staff, but like other ways of like simplifying cost expenditure, whatever that means. I am reportedly asked that at my job. Yeah. Member Ford is remembering project delivery success next to me, and I'm like, yeah, I feel that. And so I think that is something that I recognize now that the scope of what this study did probably may not have been able to include that, but I think if that was included, I would like that to be mentioned going forward, and B, have an understanding of what that is.
Yeah, no, thank you. This feedback is really helpful actually for scoping what is going forward. So really appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then you get one last piece of it, which is uh so your graph. Hi. So I actually would have appreciated an overlay graph of the two budgets that I could see the direct difference. When I first looked at those graphs, I could not understand that they were different. I think a clear demonstration of the 2050 with then what was cut out display would have been much more poignant to your effect and would have made me understand this a lot faster. So for future, can I get an overlay graph? Which is, like the smallest, nitpickiest thing in the world. And I completely recognize it. But I think to demonstrate your major points here, that type of graphic, extremely good. Okay, that was it. Thanks.
Member Baumgarten.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is my first real time getting like a deeper look as a member of the advisory committee of the long-term plan. And as someone who looks back at my notes from simply 6 months ago and was like, I planned to do that. I think it's great to have this long-term vision. And yeah, I have one clarifying question about the operations budget. I think something that a lot of the feedback, obviously, we saw went to was the consistency, operation timeliness, and frequency of transit. Are those sort of initiatives covered under the operations budget, or where would that fall?
I think it's partly in operations, but I think in terms of making transit improve, it's things like the transit priority lanes, the package of like Muni Forward improvements, which includes like the red transit lanes, signal priority, and boarding islands and things that make transit move faster and become therefore more reliable. So that's what mostly comes to mind. And so those are the relatively lower cost improvements that can be made. But obviously, major improvements like new routes or new rail grade separation, those kinds of things are also improvements that fall into the major transit projects category.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that. And I feel like I see my role here is advocating, of course, for the constituents of District 3, North Beach, Russian Hill, downtown, Chinatown. And definitely I see their interest represented in this plan. What I would love to get kind of like information from you guys is obviously things will change over time and we get a lot of like initiatives that come up that I'm assuming were covered in a long-term plan long ago, like things from like the accessibility ramps to curb reassessments. What I would love to know from like your perspective is what are the best ways to inform our community about getting their interests heard as this goes on and as updates are taken? Like, is there going to be, I know the final plan approvals coming, but like, are there future rounds of feedback? Is there a sequence of which that goes so that maybe we could help spread the news in our community?
Thank you so much for that question. I think this is going to sound like a refrain, but we are expecting to start the next major update, and I think that would be the time to sort of weigh in on the next iteration of this plan. And I think one of the things that we would like to do is, sort of better, more robust outreach, especially in sort of like neighborhoods where there's a lot of people who don't speak English as a first language. And we want to try to do better in terms of going out to meet folks where they are. So instead of having our, like town halls and you have to meet our schedule, we go to, we've had great success in other more focused studies, going to like farmers markets and, meeting neighborhood people who might not otherwise, that we might not otherwise reach. So I think there are lots of opportunities and we would love your your help with reaching those folks and kind of promoting our efforts, not just the SFGP, but other, like when I think we start other projects in District 3.
Yeah, and if I could add, Member Baumgarten, you're picking up Member Barz's tone out as she goes out and you're on the way in. It's perfect. I just wanted to remind you, this is kind of funky. Going back to Member Ford's questions, you do have to operate at these two different levels. So input to the effect of, for instance, I want more money to go to accessible curb ramps and stuff like that. This long range plan is the perfect place to make that, to grow that bucket. If the intent is to weigh in on, I want it at these intersections, or I want it near transit stops, like a priority, this body is actually good for that a lot, because we recently just had a curb ramp request come forward, right? And then you can weigh in on specific location prioritization. It tends to be the really large projects that get called out in the long range plan, and everything else tends to be like buckets and how big you want that bucket to be.
Yeah, totally. I was thinking about from like, this is obviously the strategic initiative. It's like, do we want street maintenance? We want more lines for Muni and all that, more operations. So that's kind of, yeah, totally. Thank you.
Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to make a comment after Member Ortega mentions, clearly survey says make transit more frequent and reliable. And those two things we can pursue to reassess the Muni routing. After pandemic, we have a lot of changes, but without really MTA properly assess those demand shifted. For example, recently I have met 3 friends. They're from Santa Clara, San Jose County. But the good news, they want to visit San Francisco. Everyone says, oh, now San Francisco become safe. I want to visit. So one family came to those 4th of July night. And then what happened, something happened. So the kids took the car train to come San Francisco. But after the midnight, they cannot take the car train. Car train's off midnight, so they have to call their parents. They said 3,000 people waiting for next car train, but they missed. So everybody called their parents. Parent drive to come to pick them up. That's the incident. Personally, I went to a couple of times, Giant game, take the 38 to T-line, but then they, rarely Giants, most of the time they lost, but they won. Means a lot of people wait until 9th inning, they come out late. So after take the T to 38, past the 10, means there's a no 38R left in. And then they only operate smaller size, not double. Means a lot of people really happy, but they cannot take the ride. Means, reliability, not only we have lines or not, sometimes frequency or operating schedule. For example, Friday, maybe 10 to midnight, maybe there's more demand than 3 to 5 p.m. So, or Saturday, Sunday, sometimes we have event, we have, everybody want to come to San Francisco through car train. I heard a lot. People want to take the car train, maybe due to electrification is a good sign. They attend the night market, Chinatown night market, some band event, marathon, all things. But Saturday, Sunday, Muni operate less, fleet. So we have to really visit. I think that's the survey, and also I'm really happy to more focusing on transit operation, but those operation funding, should include those kind of analysis. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I have a quick question. The unfunded need in the updated plan, cumulatively across all the categories, what is the total number?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm going to have to get back to you on that, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I would really appreciate that. That would be very helpful. And I really appreciate and agree with a lot of the feedback from my fellow members. I do want to just lodge that these kinds of documents, even if you were not required to go through this exercise and publish them, as a member of the public who wants to see these kinds of improvements, I benefit from these being available to the public. These are the kinds of documents that I look at when I'm thinking about, advocating for new revenue sources, when I'm thinking about do I agree that the city and county's current vision plan and priorities, or like where they think they would like to invest the money, agree with my experience and the experience of the folks that I represent. So I do appreciate this exercise being done, and I am looking forward to seeing the final and more detailed presentation. So thank you. Are there any, is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. Driving alone, I think it's attributable to the culture of convenience, and the younger people are renting their transportation with Waymos and Ubers and Lyfts. Job growth, I really question that versus the demographics, which has had a declining birth rate over the last 20 years. In the last 10 years, the population has not been replacing itself with new births. And regarding the job growths, I heard on the radio that the young are not literate by the 3rd grade. They can't even count to 10. It's really causing a problem. And then complicating that is that the colleges now are calling for the SAT test to be reinstated because the new college attendees are not literate enough. And on major transit projects, I say, can we afford it? I heard on the radio this morning that they did a survey and they said 30% of the people surveyed steal from the grocery store or stores. They've stolen things. So when I put all this together, I kind of indicate that can we afford new transit projects? And also, is the empire in decline that we're experiencing right now? So those are my general comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
Yes, we have one comment from Roland. Go ahead, Roland.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I've been listening and I fully sympathize with member Bart and others' frustration. And as you know, I originally came from Europe. And I've been watching this going on for 20 years now, and I guess the best case scenario, maybe I got another 10 years left. And I think the time has come to do something different here, because this is not working. We get all these disjointed projects all over the place, and then these consultants came up with yada, 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 and then somehow people are expected to find funding. And by the way, whoever said that the portal is fully funded is, pardon the expression, delusional. It isn't. So I'm basically going to go back 130 years to my ancestry and make a proposal of essentially what 130 years ago became the backbone of China, and come up with a backbone of the Bay Area instead of all these disjointed projects, and come up with a concession proposal all the way from Gilroy to Emeryville in North Bay, because I don't know if you listened this tonight, there was no mention of Link 21. Actually, our last SFCTA CAC, Brian Larkin, some of you may remember, he used to be on this committee, asked the city to reach out to the mayor and ask the mayor what's happening to Link 21. But you know what? Link 21 is CalSTA, California State Transportation Authority. We have got to put all this stuff together, have one entity taking care of it. If it's a concession, it's either going to be French or Japanese. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
There is no additional remote public comment.
All right, great. Thank you. Public comment is closed, and thanks again so much for the presentation. All right, let's move on to item 8, introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? Member Levine?
Yeah, I'd like, it's been a
Excuse
while
me,
now.
Member Levine, could you please pull the mic closer? Our remote audience was having trouble hearing you.
There you go. It's been a while since there's been any kind of an update on the Van Ness BRT, and I'd like to see some sort of update about where we are versus where we were before the project was done. It was obviously a major project over a number of years, and I would hope that we will see some significant and happy results as of the 2026. So I'd like to see, it doesn't have to be a presentation necessarily, but I'd like to see if they could put together a study that would be available to members of this committee. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Do any other CAC members have any new business? Member Margarita?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to see if there's a possibility to look at in District 9. I know I brought it up before in conversation in different topics, but for it to be specifically like some kind of analysis or evaluation on the Silver Avenue area where there's like not enough stops, not enough slow driving ramps, in the sense that, in that area, there has been, unfortunately, a pedestrian killed. We still don't know who did that. On the Sweeney Street side, which is like one block down off of Silver, same thing. There's like a big area between Sweeney and Princeton where there's nothing there that's making drivers forcibly like slow down. And it's a big three-way diamond area, and there's been so many hit and runs there, like so many, and the police just come see what cars were crashed into, and then there's the towing. But it's like, why isn't there something intentionally happening to make it safer in that area? I think we need to be more preventative versus reactive. And it's such a wide lane there that if somebody's walking and it's an elderly person and they're slow, or a little kid on a bike, I'm just like super scared in that area. So yeah, that's my humble request.
If no other CAC members have any new business, is there any public comment in the room on new business? Not seeing any. Operators or any remote public comment on new business?
No, there is no remote public comment.
Great. Move on to item 9, public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment? No. Then is there any remote public comment?
Yes, we have one. Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. And this is a mask through the chair. I've been attending the TJPA meetings, and let's just say politely, I've been having issues with the AV arrangements. The video is not optimal. What you have here, it's world class. I mean, I don't know if you can see what I can see, but this is it. This is what people should be aiming at. And one of the problems I've been having is that the audio is so bad that if there wasn't a transcript at the bottom of the screen, I wouldn't be able to follow the meeting. So if you could share with them not only the way that you arrange your camera so that I can see the entire committee on both sides of the room, and then this splendid piece of equipment that they can see sitting on a tripod right in front of Director Bass, and share the technology with TJPA, that'd be wonderful, so that I can actually hear what they're saying. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you for that. Appreciated. And there is no further public comment.
Great. Public comment is closed, and do appreciate all the work that staff puts into making the meetings accessible to the public. So thank you. All right. That puts us on item 10, which is adjournment. This meeting is now adjourned, and hope everyone has a great recess.